Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update. Join the only official Telegram channel of Rao's IAS Study Circle to get relevant material and important updates. Hello everyone and welcome to Daily News Simplified, your one-stop solution to detailed analysis of current affairs which are published in the Delhi edition of Hindu newspaper and are equally relevant for the UPSC preparation. Articles dated 10th of November 2021 are listed on your screen and the timestamping for these articles is already given in the description box. So let us begin with the first article for the day. Following the daily trend of mapping questions from the UPSC Prelims Examination 2021, today we are going to take question number 92 from the set A of this exam. This question was asked from the constitutional provisions in India and asked about what is the position of right to property in India. The answer to this question was option B, and most of the students had confusion between option A and option B for the reason being that in option A there was a word given citizen and in option B it was any person. In one of the compasses, that is the polity compass for 2021, Rao's IAS has explicitly provided all these constitutional provisions in much detail. And in one of the points we have clearly mentioned that no person shall be derived of his property save by authority of law, that is article 300A. On the similar line, we have taken the same provision in one of the Daily News Simplified dated 13th of January 2020. And in this also we have provided that no person shall be deprived. This shows the kind of approach followed by Rao's IAS in covering the current affairs from different mediums. So the first article for today's discussion was published on page 06 of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper, that is the editorial page. This article tells us about the recent controversy which took place between India and Pakistan regarding the death or the killing of Indian fishermen by the Pakistani authorities. One Indian fisherman was recently killed, that is on 7th of November, unfortunately, by the Pakistani forces on the pretext of trespassing. Now, why this was an issue of trespassing? Why it has become a national concern now in India? And what is the current situation of fishermen as well as the international maritime boundary between Pakistan would be the focus for this article as well as our discussion. The relevance of this article comes from the fact that in prelim examination, UPSC can ask questions related to the maritime boundaries and its different classification, including the territorial water, contiguous zones and many other classification. It may also ask questions related to the map work and related concepts. As far as mains examination is concerned, it is important for your general studies paper 2 under the heading of India's relationship with its neighbor. Under General Studies Paper 3, it could be asked in the category of national security. The content for this article would include India-Pakistan maritime dispute, its historical aspect, what have been done by now, and how far we have achieved success in this dispute. We will also look into some of the fishing rights at national and international stage and what are the different laws which classifies the fishing rights of a particular nation. We will look into one of the important effort of joint judicial committee between India and Pakistan in this matter. We will also look into some of the international laws on maritime boundary, which includes your UN clause. And lastly, we will look into some aspects of India's prisoners in Pakistan as well as the extradition treaty. So let us start the discussion with the map work first. Well, as you can see, this is the map of North Arabian Sea. This black line is the border between India and Pakistan. However, the last tail part of this border is known as Sir Creek. This Sir Creek remains a border issue and a dispute between India and Pakistan, for the matter being that Pakistan demands the eastern border of this area as the international boundary. On the other hand, India considered the middle path of this Sir Creek to be the international border. And this has remained a bone of contention between both these nations. And because of the Sir Creek, India and Pakistan could not delineate the international maritime boundary between both the countries. As you have studied multiple times in the past DNS as well as in many other books, that each nation has a different set of international water or maritime boundaries, which you can see through this diagram. Now, if you go through this map again, the area which is not blue in color shows the territorial region. And in this diagram, the territorial region will form this part. Then again we see the other areas. Let's say the run of Kutch or the important lakes in India, or maybe some other lakes in India. Let's say the small lake or these different lakes. All these are part of internal water. As you can see, this one also, this small lagoon type lake, this is also part of internal water. And in this diagram, this internal water lies in the first front of the international border. After internal water, we have territorial sea, which is 12 nautical mile. Then we have contiguous zone, which is again the 12 nautical mile. The area extended from baseline to the 200 nautical mile is known as exclusive economic zone. So if we have to draw all these zones, let's say on the Gujarat border. So what we will find a hypothetical border which is running across the Gujarat border close to 200 kilometers from the coastal area. And this border will frame the exclusive economic zone of Gujarat as well as India. Similarly, Pakistan has its own exclusive economic zone and territorial waters along with contiguous zone. Now the issue arises when people or the fishermen from Indian region trespasses or by accident enters into the territorial water of Pakistan. And this is the reason why Pakistan has killed these innocent fishermen. International law or any other treaty is not followed by India and Pakistan as far as maritime boundary is concerned in this region. So what we will do, we will look into all these aspects and dispute from the perspective of UPSC. The maritime dispute between India and Pakistan could be classified into 5 different headings. The conflict itself, the previous attempts which were made to solve this, historical background, why we have failed to resolve the issue, and some of the technical disputes. As far as conflict is concerned, there are 2 types of conflicts which India and Pakistan share as far as maritime boundary is concerned. First deals with the delineation of boundary between the areas of Sir Creek, and the second one is delineation of international border on the maritime zone. Now let us start with the historical aspect first. The dispute of Sir Creek started way back in 1908 when the rulers from Kutch in India and Sindh in Pakistan. By the way, both these areas were part of India before the independence. So this dispute actually led to a wider issue after the independence. And the issue of Sir Creek started, and this led to the further extension to the maritime boundary issue. In order to solve these issues, there were talks which began in 1989 between both the governments. And by now, 9 rounds of these talks have been conducted without any result. In 1994, India issued a non-paper to the Pakistan with a promise to solve this issue through the open discussion, but yet there was no success which was achieved. In 1998, working group was constructed between both these countries, but yet it was fruitless. Now the question arises that why these issues failed. The answer to this would be that Pakistan wants to keep the maritime resolution along with Kashmir dispute as a common agenda. Well, it has been the habit of Pakistan on the international as well as the bilateral relations that they have always kept Kashmir as the core issue between India and Pakistan irrespective of what issue they are talking about. Pakistan claims the entire Sir Creek, and this is one of the basic reasons why India and Pakistan could not frame the international border on the Arabian Sea. Now this brings us to the technicalities of this issue. What are the technical faults that both these countries are facing as far as border crisis is concerned? The first technical mistake is that both countries are providing different maps on the international platform. India considered Sir Creek as an area of navigable ability and demand on the basis of the international law that navigable channels should be divided on the basis of equal area on both the sides. But Pakistan does not consider Sir Creek to be navigable, so it does not consider the middle path as a way forward. India considered Sir Creek and the maritime boundary as a separate issue, while Pakistan considered both of them as the same issue. And the last one is the straight line, which most of the countries define as an international maritime boundary. And this straight line, which was determined by the Pakistan, is not based on the rules created by United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea. So based on all these criteria, now we come to a conclusion that the issue between both these countries remain unresolved for the criteria which they are holding together, for the criteria which they are holding as far as Sir Creek is concerned. So once Sir Creek is resolved, the international border would be easy to delineate. Now coming to the fishing rights. When we talk about the fishing rights, we normally talk about the fishing rights in Indian water, maybe the coastal water or the interior water. Fishing could be divided into inland fishery and the marine fisheries. The matter of concern for this article was the marine fisheries. The fishermen who were close to the Gujarat coast accidentally enters into the territory of Pakistan. And this brings us to the knowledge that we should have some basic understanding about the fishing rights in India. For this, we have taken two different acts and the provision which is followed in India as far as marine fishery is concerned. These three slides will be very important for you to understand the fishing rights and its practice in India. As far as fishery management is concerned, so we know under 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution, we have three different lists. And fisheries comes under the state list as a state subject, which also provides the direct power and role of state government in the fisheries governance. As far as role of the state government is concerned, it is just to complement the effort made by the states. Inland fisheries is completely and fully managed by the state governments because water resources is also under the state list. When it comes to the marine fisheries, it is shared between the center and the coastal states, including the coastal union territories. Coastal states or the union territories are responsible to provide for the development, management and regulation of fisheries, but only up to 12 nautical miles. So you should have this basic understanding in these last two statements. When it comes to the EEZ or exclusive economic zone, beyond the 12 nautical miles, the management, regulation and development comes under the Government of India. That means in 188 nautical miles after the territorial water is the responsibility of the central government on the fisheries management. In 1976, based on the International Convention, India passed the Territorial Water, Continental Shelf and Exclusive Economic Zone and Other Maritime Zone Act. As per this act, central government enjoys the complete sovereign rights in the EEZ of India. And government can allow exploration, exploitation, conservation and management of only natural resources, including the fisheries. So if there is a person who wants to go for fishing rights in the EEZ of India, they can get the permission from the central government and not the state government. Now, when it comes to the territorial waters, which is 12 nautical miles from the coast, everything in this area, including the seabed, subsoil, and in fact the air above that water body is part of Government of India and its sovereignty. All the foreign ships which are passing from the territorial water of India can have the innocent passage. Innocent passage here means no act of violence. But if the foreign warships, including the submarine and the other underwater vehicle, wants to pass from this area, requires the prior notice of the central government. Now, what is the basic difference? The basic difference is the type of ship. The first one is the natural ship or the commercial ship. This could be the one which is transporting goods from one part of the world to the other part. The second one is the warships, which is part of the defense establishment. So if the warship of, let's say, Saudi Arabian Navy is passing through the territorial waters of India, they will require a prior notice. But if the commercial ship from the Saudi Arabia is passing from that area, they will not require any notice. And they can go through that same passage in an innocent manner. And lastly, we will look into the maritime zones of India Act 1981. According to this act, India has defined the maritime zones for itself, which includes the territorial water of India along with the exclusive economic zone, that is up to 200 nautical mile. The area would be the maritime zone of India. So if in future UPSC says that India's maritime zone consists only the territorial water and the contiguous zone, that will automatically become wrong. Foreign vessels or foreign ships can be granted permission to go for fishing in this EEZ, but only with a permit or the license. So it means that foreign ships can also come and have fishing activity in India if they have the license. Without license, they will not be permitted to go for fishing activity. Let us now look into what is the prisoner's dilemma. Now, this is not the literal meaning of what, it is just a hypothetical heading which we have provided. So, prisoner's dilemma here simply means the people who have been innocent in the past and who are innocent in the current perspective have been kept as a prisoners in these countries for trespassing or for crossing those areas which are invisible to the human naked eye. The ratio of fishermen between India and Pakistan is 1:5. That is, one Pakistani prisoner in India against 5 Indian prisoners in Pakistan. Now you can imagine the kind of atrocities Pakistan is doing on these innocent fishermen. Since 2008 terrorist attack which conducted in Mumbai by the Pakistani sponsored terrorism, the hardship which is conducted by the forces or the defense force has increased manifold on the fishermen. The killings of the innocent fishermen only come from the Pakistan. India has not killed any Pakistani fishermen. In the absence of extradition treaty, innocent prisoners could not be brought back by India through a legal mean. And lastly, most of the fishermen who crosses these international waters have been termed as informers, spy or intruders against the national security of these nations. And once these kind of taglines are added to a person, his or her returning to his own nation or motherland becomes almost impossible. In 2007, India-Pakistan Joint Judicial Committee was formed. Now, what is the purpose of this committee? Well, first of all, this committee had 4 judges from both India and Pakistan, and they sat together to find out the long-lasting solution to treat prisoners who have been kept in both these countries on the pretext of crossing the international waters. This committee has remained dysfunctional for long, but it was revived in 2018, but yet final results are far from what it was expected. Now, as we have said that India does not have an extradition treaty with Pakistan. Now, what does it mean? Well, extradition is nothing but a formal process where one state surrenders an individual to the other state for prosecution or for the punishment of crimes committed in requesting country's jurisdiction. It simply means that, let's say there is a person who has committed a crime in India and has eloped to, let's say, the other country including the Saudi Arabia. And if Saudi Arabia and India both share an extradition treaty, Saudi Arabia through the legal mean will send that person back to India for prosecution or for punishment for crime. So India as of now has signed extradition treaty with 48 nations. On the other hand, US has signed over 100 nations. Apart from this treaty, India also have extradition arrangement which is lesser in terms of rules and framework. This arrangement have been signed with 12 nations. Extradition treaty comes under the control of External Affairs Ministry. And for your information, India does not share extradition treaty with Pakistan, and this is the reason why we cannot bring our prisoners, we cannot bring our fishermen back quickly. Now, what should be the possible way forward to resolve these issues? The first way forward should be that both these countries should comply with the rules made by the UN Clause Law and its framework. Once these rules are followed in letter and spirit, both these countries will definitely come up with a common rule and understanding. Both these countries should work together to solve the Sir Creek issue as early as possible, and along with this, formalize legally the extradition treaty between both these countries. But the question is that can India extradite the terrorist which it has arrested to Pakistan back? That remains a matter of concern and also one of the reasons why both these countries are not signing the extradition treaty. They should also look into the revival of legal framework through the judicial mechanism. Let's say they do not find out a resolution to the extradition treaty, then it's not a matter of concern. They can also go for the similar extradition through the other judicial mechanism. And lastly, they should conduct quarterly and mandatory engagement and meetings on maritime issues in order to resolve them as quick as possible. With this discussion in place, now I will leave you with this important MCQ to practice. So read this question carefully and answer in the comment box. With this, now we move to the next article for the day. This article was published on page 14 of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper and concerns with the economic phenomena at a global level. Now what has happened recently is that there is a rise in the prices of oil again in the international market. The reason being that the United States has lifted the travel ban and that has increased the demand of aviation fuel because United States is the country which has the largest air traffic in the world. Now because of this sudden rise in the demand, there is a creation of short-term demand supply gap. Demand has increased over the supply and this has also raised the prices of oil in the current global market. Now when it comes to the relevance of this article, it is relevant from your prelims perspective where UPSC has multiple times asked the questions related to the demand and supply of a particular good and service. As this is part of your 12th class NCERT economics, it is relevant for this exam also. From mains perspective, this could be asked under the trade related questions in your general studies paper 3. And you can also quote these examples in one paper or the other through different means. The content for this discussion would be short and brief and it will include the factors which are affecting the oil prices in international markets. So let us start with looking into what are the factors which have defined the quality, quantity and price of oil in the international market. The first of all, we have the post-COVID global economic recovery. Because there is a sudden rise in the economic activity across the globe, there is also a rise in the petrol and the diesel demand in the countries. We are also seeing the recovery in major economies including US, China and India. Expansion of trade and service is another reason because once we go for trading relations between the countries, what we see the rise in shipping, transportation. And this shipping transportation demands more fuel than before. Then we have the issue related to the rising share of transportation and passenger vehicle. The best example could be India and China, where four-wheeler demand is increasing with 4 times every 5 years. Then we have the cartelization of OPEC. OPEC is a group of oil producing country and they have created a cartel. Now what is cartel? Cartel is a small group of firms or companies which have similar product. They make this grouping in order to control the supply of a product. And when they control the supply of a product, they automatically control the price of that product. Suppose that there are 5 different companies and they are selling a same product, let's say oil, or let's say there are 5 different companies selling a similar petrol in the market, but they are charging different prices. These are the different prices charged by different companies. And because of this, in one way or the other, they are making losses. Now what they do? They make a single group or a cartel and all of them charges the same price, let's say price Z. And when they charges the same price, it's not a matter of who supplies more product or not. So now they can control the supply, they can control the prices. Whenever they want to raise the prices at the international platform, they can reduce their supply in the market. And in order to reduce the price, they can increase their supply. And this is the most important reason for increasing or decreasing international oil prices. And the last one is the speculation in oil market. In 2020, there was a case when the price of a specific oil type, West Texas, went in negative form. Yes, the prices went into negative. And this is one of the reasons why in 2020 prelims, UPSC asked question in this area also. Hence, this is also one of the reasons why we are discussing this topic in much detail. Apart from these major issues, there could be some small issues which are country specific. Let's say a particular country is going through the economic crisis, or maybe a medical crisis, or anything else such as war. They may increase or decrease their demand or supply for the particular oil, which may or may not impact the international prices. And we also have the concept of taxation, including the excise duty, which may impact the prices at the international level. With this discussion, now I will leave you with the past reference. So this was a question in 2020 related to the West Texas Intermediate, and the answer was the crude oil. On the same line, I have given you a question related to the oil prices in the international level. So read this question carefully and answer in the comment box. Let us now move to the next article for the day. This article was published on page 1st of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper. Apart from one thing, which is the Advocate General at a state level, there is nothing which we need to focus upon. Advocate General is a constitutional body mentioned in the Constitution of India. Hence, it is important for the UPSC preparation. Apart from this, there is no need for you to study the political aspect or what party or what leader has said to the other party or the leader. That is not required in the UPSC examination. The relevance of this article comes from the fact that in prelim examination, UPSC can ask questions related to the aspect of constitution in India. And in the mains examination in General Studies paper 2, they can ask questions related to the constitutional bodies in India. The relevance of this topic also comes from the fact that in 2019, UPSC in General Studies paper 2, in mains examination as a question 14, has already asked question related to the Attorney General of India. And as they can ask questions on the Attorney General, there is no surprise they can also ask question on the Advocate General. So as a matter of fact and as a matter of revision, it is important for us to go through both these people and their bodies and appointment. So let us look them one by one through the comparative analysis. The Attorney General is part of the Union government and Advocate General is part of the state government. Who are they? They are the law officers. That means they will practice law on behalf of the government. So whenever there is a case against the government, they will represent the government in the court. Attorney General comes from the Article 76, Advocate from the Article 165. As attorney is part of the Union government, he is appointed by the President. Advocate General is appointed by the Governor. As simple as to differentiate. The Attorney General is the law officer at Union government, Advocate General as a law officer in the state government. Both are eligible to become a judge, but as attorney is part of the Union government, he is eligible to become the Supreme Court judge. That does not mean that he will become the Supreme Court judge. It means that the criteria of appointment or the eligibility remains as similar to the judge of a Supreme Court. For the Advocate General, he should be eligible to become as a judge of High Court. Both of them hold the office during the pleasure of their respective executive head, that is President and Governor. The remunerations are also decided by the President and the Governor respectively. Now comes the duty. The duty, functions and privileges more or less remains the same. Both of them advise to their respective government on the legal matters. They represent their respective governments in the legal courts and also perform the different duties as far as legality is concerned given by their respective executive heads, that is President and the Governor. So today, President or the Governor can say that these law officers should do or advise or represent government on a certain platform. As far as privileges are concerned, both of them have right to audience within their respective territories. That is, Advocate General can have audience in the territories of the state, any court, be it the High Court or be it the subordinate court. Advocate General will not have audience in the Supreme Court. This you should remember. They can attend the parliamentary proceedings or the proceedings of the state legislature respectively. They can speak, take part, but does not have voting right, and this remains the same for both of them. Now why this is the clause? Because they are neither elected nor appointed into the legislation. And lastly, they have right to practice in a private manner. That means with the consent of their respective employer. Employer here means the government. In case of Attorney General, central government is the employer. In case of Advocate General, state government is the employer. With the permission of their employer, they can practice law in their private sphere also. With this basic difference in both the law officer, now we come to the respective question attached to this article. So read this question carefully and answer in the comment box. With this, now we come to the end of today's Daily News Simplified, and I leave you with question of the day. Thank you.